Hey everybody, it's me, Matt Wood, and welcome back to MW Media. Sorry it's been a while. Holidays have been chaotic, a lot going on and stuff. But it's a new year. And honestly, if I could wrap up all of my feelings of the new year into one video clip, it would be this.
We finally really did it. You maniacs! You blew it up!
So, moving on to bigger and brighter things, coming up for MW Media is a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, we're in the works with a bunch of things. Similar to the Star Wars short, we're going to start pumping out more regular mini-movie type things, or like scenes or short clips, or whatever you want to call them. Mini shorts, or minis, whatever. I don't know, we'll come up with some clever name for them that everyone will probably hate. But look forward to a bunch more of those, along with a little bit more behind the scenes focused on that specifically. So instead of doing more just tutorial-based filmmaking, we're going to focus more on like making of type stuff. Which means our videos are going to be a bit more sporadic. However, I got a day job and a very demanding dog who has a lot of feels. And her feels are very deep. I'll show you how deep they are. Hang on. So, without further ado, I owe you guys a tutorial episode. And I figured that today's tutorial episode would be... Drum roll, please. Green screens! That's right. We did some really cool footage with my good friend Jen Wilson on a green screen with a fan, and it looked really neato. Let's check it out. Welcome back to another exciting After Effects tutorial. It's me, Matt Wood, and today we are going to be learning about the magic of green screen. And you might have seen the really cool shot that we did previously with our friend Jen standing on that really cool billboard, and it was pretty rad. What we're doing today is we're just going to be focusing more or less on learning how to key and how to get a good key so that you can get shots like that. Reason being is that we did a lot of third-party plugins for that short, and we're just not going to go into the tutorial on how to do that quite yet. So, without further ado, let's get to green screening. We have brought our shot down into a new composition and just let it sit in the composition settings the way it was. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come down to our keyer, and we're going to select Key Light, which is built right into After Effects. We're going to select our little eyedropper tool here, and we're going to pick a spot kind of close to her skin. And you'll see that we're already getting a really good key. If we come into Key Light settings and pull our little drop down tab, we can look at our screen mat. What this is going to show us is our alpha setting. So it's going to show us your light hot spots and dark spots, the darker spots being the areas that are going to be keyed out. So in theory, you want to try and get her to be as much of a white silhouette as possible against as black of a backdrop as possible. So to do that, we'll come into our screen mat here, and we're actually going to clip the black up. And we'll see that we now have this very nice crisp black background, but it's starting to bleed onto her, and we're starting to get some pixelization. So to clean that up, we'll pull the white spectrum down. And it's at about 56. We're about to hit our threshold here, so maybe we'll put this at like 60. And that looks pretty good. So let's come back and we'll go down to final result here. This will just kind of show us what we're working with. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is just to kind of help us with the sake of editing, and obviously because we have to isolate her from the shot, we are now going to use our masking tool to get rid of the box and the top of her head there. So what we're going to do is select G on our keyboard to bring up our pen tool. We're just going to zoom in, and we'll notice that like parts of her head and stuff like that are still showing. So we can key these out with the mask tool by just tracing around. And if her head moves at all, we can animate the mask later to match up. So we'll just bring this down a bit, and once we get down to her feet, we can zoom in here, and I mean, it doesn't have to be the best, but you know, make it passable. All right, we have got our character all masked out and keyed. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is if we toggle the transparency grid, we can kind of get a better idea for what the edge is looking like. And so far it's looking pretty harsh. So in order to clean that up, we're going to come in and just kind of put the softness up to say 0.5. And then we're actually going to shrink it in by say minus 1.5. And that's just going to kind of give us a little bit of a sharper edge and kind of get rid of the blur and some of the pixelization that we were getting. And we can actually even do a little less. We can do like minus 1. And that looks pretty good. Now, the next thing that we would want to do is we'll notice that we're getting some bleed here where the dress was see-through on the green screen. So in order to fix that, we're going to come down to our shot, and we're going to duplicate it by hitting Control D or Command D on a Mac. And we're going to delete key light from this bottom layer. We'll turn the top layer off. Now what we're going to do is hit F4. This will toggle between 3D and motion blur and those options to your track matte and your mode options. What we want to do is with this file selected, we want to set the track matte to alpha. What that's going to do is it's just going to kind of help fill in some of those blank spots a little better. And now we can come into our screen matte again, and we can actually kind of adjust this a little bit higher. And we'll come back to our final result. And now what we can do is if we turn that off and we turn the bottom layer back on, we now see that we're getting almost a completely full image, and it's looking a lot better. And we can even shrink it in just a tad more. And maybe we can just clip the black just a little bit higher. And that is looking pretty good. So we can even increase the softness up to say 1, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a flip there, and that's looking really nice. So this right here, guys, is a pretty good basis for getting a good key. And now if we scrub through, we can see that everything is staying pretty consistent. We are going to have some trouble with things like the dress here, but those can always be repaired with color correcting or animated masks later on. You can even turn the top layer back off in order to help, back on, I mean, in order to kind of help fill that in just a little bit if you want to. But you will notice you will get some degradation on your edges again. Now, just for funsies, I guess the next thing that we could do here is, if we want, the way that I would go about doing this is by selecting both of these layers and right-clicking and hitting Precompose. What this is going to do is it's going to combine both of these layers into a separate composition so that when you're integrating this into another environment or you're trying to key it into other stuff, you don't have to worry about both layers being muddled up with the rest of your comp. And this way you can apply separate effects to these joint files simultaneously without having to go back into this as a separate composition. So what we're going to call this is Gen Keyed, and we're going to hit OK. And now if we come into this, we'll notice that Gen Keyed is now the one composition, and it's been opened up in a separate tab. We're just going to close that. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to hit F4, and this is just kind of, we're going to set up a very basic kind of scene here. Nothing real fancy, but just to give you an idea of how to, you know, get her done. So we're going to toggle F4. We're going to make her 3D, and we're going to push her back a little bit, say about right there. That looks pretty good. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and create a new solid, and we can call this ground, and we'll hit OK, and we'll come into the effect settings, and we're going to go to generate gradient ramp, and this will just give us this nice white to gray gradient, which I am already digging. We're going to have this selected. We're going to pull it below her so that it's underneath, and we're going to toggle 3D, and that's going to make the ground layer also a 3D layer. And we'll hit W. We're just going to rotate it until it's flat. And then bring it below our actress there. And we can even extend it out a bit. And maybe even move it back a while in Z space. Now what we can do is, if we want to, we can come to our top view, and this will actually let us see both files in 3D space from a top view, which is just kind of handy for positioning things. So we're going to take our actress and we're going to actually scooch her a little closer in, and then we'll come back down to our active camera, make it fit, and we'll notice that the floor is intersecting, so we can actually pull the floor down a bit until it matches with her feet. And we'll hit S for scale, and we're just going to really ramp it up. And maybe we'll push it back in Z space just a bit. If you want to do this faster, you can hold down Shift. And that's looking pretty cool. Now, just to kind of set up another sort of background image, just to kind of make this look kind of cool and ethereal and neat, we are just going to use a couple of still shots that we've accumulated of some cool skies. So we can do, let's say, yeah, why not? And we'll pull that down to the very bottom, and we will just scoop it up. And what we can even do is we can come back into our ramp here, and maybe instead of black for the end of the ramp, we can kind of choose one of these kind of lighter blues. That looks pretty cool. That gives us a little bit more of a neat edge. And if we want to kind of blend this in a little bit, we can have our ground layer selected, and if you come over here and choose the shape tool, that'll just give you a automatic mask that you can do in that shape, and that looks pretty good. We'll hit V and we'll just drag that over. Whoopsie doodles. Let's try that again. We'll just do it with the pen tool this time. And there we go, and we'll hit M to bring that up, and we're going to set it to subtract. And then we're just going to feather the heck out of it, just really feather it up until the back edge is just barely visible. And we can even drag this up a little. There we go. That's looking kind of neat. Now, just to maybe add another little bit of flair to it before we start color grading our character, maybe we can add something like a lens flare in. So we're going to make a new solid, and we'll call this flare. Hit OK. And we are using a third-party plugin for this, but there is also the built-in flares for After Effects that are built in. You can also get the Ignite flare pack from HitFilm, which is really awesome. And then there's also Null Light Factory from Magic Bullet and Red Giant. So that's pretty cool. So we're actually using Video Copilot's optical flares. Another awesome Video Copilot plugin. Highly suggested. And we're just going to get something really, really neat looking here. Maybe like something like this. Ooh, yeah, I like that. We're going to use that. That's cool. And you'll notice that this is not showing through, so we're actually going to toggle F4, and we're going to switch the transfer mode on this to screen, and that will just drop the alpha for us. And we're going to bring this below our ground layer and above our cloud layer, and with it selected, we can bring this flare maybe like upwards into the corner there. That looks kind of cool. And then we can actually pull out the flare refraction maybe a little bit further. That's looking pretty good. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to come in and obviously color correct our character to kind of match our environment a little better. So if we come in to Effect and Color Correction, we will come down to our handy dandy curves tool, which you cannot live without. And since she is incredibly, it's an incredibly bright environment, we can actually pump this up quite a bit here, and then maybe pull the contrast also up, but we don't want it to get too bright. And we could even come into the blue settings and maybe give her just like a hint of this kind of like soft blue, and we can even drop the contrast on that also just down a smidge. And that's already starting to look pretty good. And maybe just for a final touch, to kind of get that a little bit more realistic and integrated, is if we come in and go back to color correction, we can auto contrast after we add the curve effect, and that will just kind of help equalize her into the color spectrum of the shot. And it's looking pretty cool. Another thing that we can do, just to kind of, you know, help work with her feet a little bit here, we can go down to her mask. Hit M, and then M again, and if we just kind of shrink it in just a little bit, in fact, a little bit less than that, we could do like -4. That's a little better. Now, just to kind of add a little bit more depth to the shot here, we decided we were going to add some cool, like, kind of cloudy particles. So we'll create another solid, and we'll just call this particles. Hit OK. And we're going to want to bring it right above our key layer there. And you can do this with the built-in particle program that is created with After Effects, but we're going to be using Trapcode Particular today from Red Giant. And we'll just go into our effects builder here, and we're just going to use a basic plugin like the Cloud one, which has me sold already. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. So we'll just kind of drag this over a little bit so that the particles have some time to actually distribute. And we'll come down to our emitter, and we're just going to stretch that out hecka, just real big. Real big. And we can even increase the particle count to, say, 600. And maybe rise it up just a bit. And there we have it, guys. This is already looking pretty darn cool. If we want, you know, just for final effect here, just to really make it look classy, we can slap our good old letterbox template on it, and now we'll notice that everything isn't quite fitting, so we can actually scooch it all back just a little bit. Right on. And for the final, you know, just for the sake of making a cool looking final product here, we're going to create a adjustment layer, bring it below our letterbox template, and we're going to come in and we're just going to do a really simple color grade on this. We're using Magic Bullet Looks, but you can, you know, tons of different color grading programs out there that you can use. And let's just try and find something real nice and cool. We can just kind of use a preset, really, if we want. And we'll hit OK. And there we have it, you guys. That right there is kind of a just nice introduction to doing some basic keying and just kind of doing some basic layouts for environments. Obviously, in the future, we'll go through and we'll do some more in-depth stuff with this. And we can even go in and do some other enhancements, like showing you how to do green screen outside and stuff like that. Thanks for sticking around. I hope that this was a cool tutorial, and I hope that you guys come back again for the next one. Our next tutorial will be all about motion tracking, woo, and putting 3D objects into your shot. Here is a sneak peek. All right, and that's it for this episode, you guys. Thanks so much for sticking around. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to check us out online on Facebook at facebook.com/MWmedia and youtube.com/MWmedia. And don't hesitate to drop us a line, ask us questions, or give us requests for cool effects that you want to see, and we will do them. So, until next time, au revoir.